Slide right up. It's not the one we called up, is it? Man, that'd take a while. And this is how you come down. Back home off the water, and the water's falling out of the sky. That's a challenging few days, I'll tell you what. It's like being a brand new parent, brand new single parent, having to have a toddler dog strapped to you everywhere you go, especially on the boat. But it all worked out. She obviously had a riot, a bunch of new experiences for her, new experiences for me. And saw some more bears on the way home. She went ape shit. But anyway, now I got the internet again. I've got full Wi-Fi, editing, and sharing of items. Where I was, I had to do, there was no internet. So I was sitting on the boat, do editing on that laptop the program is, and then what I normally would do is, I can't get the photographs, so I'd have to download them onto a different place on the internet and then download them again on the laptop and then put them into the editing program. So that's why I couldn't put anything in there. And then after doing that, I had to go up and leave the laptop behind my buddy's lodge on a table out back under the deck, just leave it hooked up to the Wi-Fi and hope for the best. So there you go. Now a quick follow-up on that poor soul in the UK that is being terrorized by whatever that is. Fits the description of a lot of people have seen the forest and other places. And I would imagine there's probably a bunch of people that weren't too happy with the length of his email. And maybe he even was a little repetitive, who knows. But I want you to back it up a little bit and just consider the source. Picture you being that individual. Alright? Could you imagine going through something like that or something similar where it's so outrageous to wrap your noggin around, let alone attempting to possibly share it publicly? It'd be like a prison sentence. There's nothing you can do. You're still all by yourself, experiencing hell, and you cannot contact or talk to anybody about it. So, imagine if you finally found a place where you were safe to share and people are going to listen. You would probably keep going on and on and on and on as well. Right? Picture it, you guys. So I'm just saying, have patience, sympathy, empathy, whatever. Consider where people are coming from when they share with you here. Okay? Nobody can do, what am I trying to say? Nobody's going to be able to please everyone. Nobody's here to please anyone. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that seem to think that they need to be pleased. I don't know why, it's pretty crazy, but just remember, you guys, nobody coming here is a professional writer. Many of us have too much time, and most definitely not too many of us are going through what this man's going through. And what do you do? What do you do with that when you finally find a place where it's safe to share? Right? So let's just maintain making this a safe place to share. Maintain the safety here, okay, you guys? No matter what. If you can. Now, let's get out some new voices as we ride along. Hi, Steve. I'm responding to your request for logger encounters. I worked in various capacities in the logging industry for the last 10 years, currently as a fire and equipment watch. My background is U.S. military intelligence and various emergency services, including 9/11, prior to retiring and going into logging. I can prove this if requested. I've had numerous encounters over the years. I find it difficult to relate them. I can't make anyone understand what it was like, no matter how I try. I respect what you're doing. It has helped me deal with the whole issue more than you can know. These are all one creature. There are others besides this one. I have a lot of photos from videos I've taken. When I get creeped out, I start filming. I have at least a couple dozen other shots if you're interested. Good luck with your endeavors. Okay, man. There are some photos, and I can share them. Whatever that was, it sure seems to shift positions, doesn't it? At first I thought that was in the trunk of the tree, but it's not. Wow, there you go. I'll tell you what I appreciate you share. Appreciate it. I'll share with everybody. How about you share with us, if you can, try it. Just try it. You've heard enough people try to share here. Just maybe try to email us in the most significant items of knowledge that you've gained. How about that one? What have you learned? What have you learned? Anything that you have confirmed for yourself, for you on your ride. I don't mean tell us how it is or tell us what's what. Just tell us what you've learned for your ride that you feel very confident is true for you. And share it with us, alright, man? If you've had a whole pile of encounters, sounds like you're a pretty intelligent guy. Brave, man. Write us back and share with us your knowledge, okay? Please share your knowledge with us. All right. Here's another one. Oh, I'm feeling pretty relaxed in here. I'm pretty tired. This is titled Kids and Dogs and What If. Hi, Steve. I live in the concrete jungle known as Chicago. I'm a 26-year veteran of the world's greatest fire department. I'm a no-nonsense type of guy, but my heart is not big enough for this world. With these crazy times we're living in, I'm not sure how much of this nonsense I can take. I'm definitely not a hunter or even have a state forest close enough to hike. However, I do enjoy fishing for the fish of 10,000 casts, the mighty muskie. Steve, you need to put this wolf in water on your bucket list. My point being, I never encountered a Sabe or even seen signs, but I don't need to. Well, I'm 100% sure they are real. puzzle pieces to think about. One sec. So we can all agree that kids and dogs have a sixth sense. Just like you, little kids and dogs are attracted to me. I think they can feel how pure our hearts are. So, why is it that little kids are so drawn to the Sabe, etc.? Example. Kids telling parents that they are friends with a hairy man. He talks to me at night by my window. He told me to come into the woods. However, dogs are so fearful or go absolutely nuts when there is one around. Kids and dogs are usually a great judge of a person's intent, a pure heart, yet so opposite when it comes to Sabe. Agreed. When I was a young toddler, I had an imaginary friend till I was 5. This lasted until my little brother turned 3. I can still picture him like it was yesterday. He looked like cousin It in the Addams Family, but with a hairless face. The crazy thing was, his name was Pum Pum. Sounds Native American to me. As I think back, what if he was imaginary? By the way, I was in the city back then too. No woods for me. So he must have been a city Sabe. Haha. Anyhow, maybe this helps someone's puzzle somehow. If you ever want to chase that trophy fish in Wisconsin, let me know. Be glad to have you. Say my name because I never care what people think. Michael Carter. Michael, appreciate you and the invite, man. If I can, I'm down. And that's a great point to be made. It's confusing. How can they slip it past the kids so much? But then again, at other times, though, one spot that comes to mind, just not too far from me here, just north of Squamish, British Columbia on the Sea Sky Highway. I forget the name of that access road. Logging Road, head of the canyon. A couple there with their young child and dog were going up the road, saw 2 of these things going through the forest to the right of them, and the kid was going ballistic and the dog, upset. So one thing for certain, it just doesn't seem to be consistent across the board, right? The reactive part. The many children have been upset, but there is definitely a stronger pattern swaying the direction of them not being so upset. Lots of kids seeing that thing standing right there in the backyard, huh? Right there. Nobody sees it. Alarming. Many children being attempted to have them lured out of their bedroom windows or come out and play in the night. What is up with that? Right? That's sinister. I don't give a shit. There isn't an excuse acceptable. That's sinister. That is sinister. So, I don't know, something to think about, isn't it? And then other times, not too many, but a few times people have talked about the dogs running with them. I don't know. But the stronger pattern is dogs losing their shit when these things are around or going into absolute terror reaction hiding. So, one good thing, though, is your wheels are turning, Michael. Right. People's wheels are turning. Keep them spinning. Keep those wheels spinning. Let's figure this shit out. Somebody's going to chime in about that. Do it in this comment section below, if you can. Mark this as red. Here's another one. Sighting in Arizona, 1990. Well, Steve, I've been keeping this to myself for years. I've only told my wife and a few others. I'm a public figure, although not well known, so please don't release my name. I don't want people to think I'm just looking for a career boost, thanks. This is a long one. First, a quick background. I joined the U.S. Army after dropping out of high school and completing my education in 3 weeks at an adult high school. I scored very high on the ASFAB and had chosen specialized combat as a first, but was denied. A year later, while at tanker school at Fort Knox, I was given the option to transfer, so I took it. My military career ended that week. As far as anyone knows, I was shipped off to training for the next 2 years and spent 3 more years in a unit that didn't exist. That is that. I only mention this to explain that I don't fear life, death, or anything in between. My encounter, about 6 months after leaving the military, I was living in Arizona, outside of Phoenix. A female friend, her son, about 5, 6, and myself had decided to go fishing and camp overnight at a place I had found mostly in the middle of nowhere, desert. Oh wow, GPS coordinates were 33, 35, 42, N, 111, 13, 23, W. at an elevation of 1927 on Lake Saguaro. Saguaro? A small, mostly ignored lake between Canyon Lake and the famous Lake Roosevelt. We got there late in the afternoon and we fished for a few, mostly her and her boy for fun, while I gathered wood for a small Indian fire later after dark. So, as 10:11 p.m. rolls around, she decides to crash out in her car with her boy. And I sat in the back of my '78 Mazda wagon with the gate down, watching my beautiful little fire with small blues, red, green, and even a few white little flames licking out now and again. I should note that I was strapped, as always, with a 44 mag Blackhawk on my right hip and two 1911 45 ACPs, one under each arm. When I heard a twig snap about 10 feet away to my left behind a small bush, there was a wash that went about 300 yards back towards the main dirt road that was soft, gravelly sand. Anyhow, suddenly, he was in my head projecting pictures, but speaking in a sense. He was saying, "The fire is beautiful, so many colors. I'm just looking, and mean no harm." But I started to get apprehensive. I really didn't understand what was happening. No doubt. And that's when my training kicked in. I came out of my car fast as a jackrabbit with the 44 in hand. I heard it stand up and take off at a dead run up the wash. With each step, I could hear the stride get longer and longer until they were about 1 to 2 seconds apart. And as each hit the ground, it shook the ground until it was about 100 feet away. I never fired a shot, but would guess it had to weigh 800 to 1,000 pounds. I thought to myself, what the F was that? After about 30 minutes of pure shock, I started to calm down a bit and crawled into the back of my car, 44 out and ready, and half assessed, drifted off to sleep. At that time, and still mostly to this day, I would wake if a mouse farted a mile away. Around 2 a.m. I jolted awake. The moon had finally risen and cast a glow over the camp, and the fire was out mostly. Looking across the water, just about 150 feet away, I noticed a silhouette of a boulder that wasn't there before, and heard splashing at the water's edge. Then I noticed something moved on the boulder. Then the boulder stood up, and that's when I saw it. It was a female. It had to be. With a smaller one on her back, she had to be 7 to 8 feet tall without doubt. And then movement, about another 25 foot, up the small rise behind her. And it was him. Every bit of 10 feet. Shoulders 3 to 4 feet wide, coming down the hill towards her. I heard a couple of muffled, well, I don't want to say grunts, but they weren't grunts, but more like words, as if to say, "Let's go." They walked together, her slightly behind, up and over the rise, and were gone. I relaxed and I went to sleep. The next morning I got up, and so did my friend, her son, all ready for a day of fishing. I quietly told her what happened, and of course, she didn't believe me. She said, "Let's go look where you said it was." "Okay," I replied. We walked around the bush, and you could see it instantly. A print, but just the ball and the toes about 4 inches deep left foot, and a knee imprint as big as a basketball. And to the right of it, a full print right foot, and it was kneeling. I could put my whole fist into the toe print. What? Holy shit. You could also see where it stood and turned as it ran away. The first stride was about 6 feet apart, and the prints were clear, about 14 to 18 inches long and 6 to 8 inches wide at the ball. That was enough for her. She grabbed her son and said, "We're leaving right now." Poor little guy was really disappointed, but I completely get her reaction. I said goodbye as they left and went tracking. As I followed the easy-to-read track, the stride extended with each step. 6 foot, 8 foot, 10 foot, 14 foot. And it stayed around there all the way up the wash. Then a slight turn to the right out of the wash and disappeared. Well, that was it. I went home. Well, the next day I noticed she never came home. So I called her, before cell phones, at her mother's house to see if they had seen her. Her brother got on the phone and said she was on her way to a psychiatrist and that she had a mental breakdown. and couldn't talk. And that was it. I never saw or talked to her again. I moved away over a year or two later and never been back. I just hope she's okay. Not everyone can handle the knowledge that we're not alone. Well, that's it. Thanks to you for all you do. I really think you've helped a lot of people to cope with their own experiences. And as for me, it's just one of the many weird things I've seen and just have always kept to myself. No fear here. Keep it up. We're all listening every day. Diamond Lou. Okay, Lou? That poor one, it's a common reaction. How couldn't it be a common reaction, right? How could it not be a common reaction today? And I wonder if, she probably isn't, but I wonder if she is listening to this channel by now, maybe, possibly. You never know, right? I don't know. That is one hell of a find and experience, but the size description you just said, I'm picturing putting my fist in the toe of anything print besides an elephant. Oh my God, that would be something else to see that, wouldn't it? Alright, man, share. You learn anything else, you know what to do. What do we got here? Another one. I just recently discovered your channel, and I've been enjoying reading the stories that people have submitted to you. Before I start, I'd like to mention my theories about what Sasquatches are, and why most people have a reaction of horror to them, and a traumatic fear that changes the rest of their lives. Number one, we hear about the Native American war with the giants, and I suspect the red-haired giants were Sasquatches, and that they, can't tell where all the hair was on the body because they recovered bones all over the world, actually, with just a few strands of hair attached. Number two. Second, the Book of Enoch, recently available mainstream, talks about the Watcher angels breeding with daughters/granddaughters of Cain-cursed angels with cursed human lineage. Likely would create evil offspring, right? Our finest warriors with highly trained perception that tells them they're in the presence of evil and danger, come away terrified, means that there is something horrific there. Anyway, just an idle thought. Secondly, I am mentioning the name of a friend's business, but I haven't asked permission to do so. Maybe there's a way to mask that. I don't care if you use my first name, but using my last name might impact my clearance renewal, although I swear it's all true. I appreciate the respect you show to people, and I'm certain that makes a difference. I appreciate it so much I've decided to tell you my stories. Although they won't terrify anyone or change their lives, people might realize that encounters can happen to anyone at any time and don't have to be a dramatic deal. In fact, although I can't say that I have seen Sasquatch, I can say that he definitely saw me. My first recollection of hearing about Sasquatch was in the summer of the mid to late 70s when a friend of my father's, a country deputy that I will call Jim, that lived about 45 miles away from my family in the mountains between two large towns, okay, large for Montana, Helena and Great Falls, Montana. I recall Jim explaining to Dad that he had just returned from a 5-state task force conference concerning the ongoing cattle mutilations. Each state that had the most mutilations sent a representative with the state's boxes of X-Files. Their collection of weird happenings were taken to analyze by the task force to see if there was any other phenomena happening in the same time period and area of the cattle deaths. Their end result was that the only other phenomena seen in all mutilation areas were Bigfoot sightings. In recent times, we know now that there are also often UFO sightings, but back then there weren't so many. Jim went on to tell my dad that there was a hermit that lived near him up in the mountains. Mind you, the hermit had enough money to be considered eccentric. A retired businessman that had enough money to set himself up on a section of land in the woods with a huge log mansion in the middle of it and heavy grade 6-foot-high construction-grade chain-link fence around the entire property. He collected rescue dogs and had dozens of them. There's a sign on the main gate to honk, and he would put the dogs up in a kennel by the house. He just wanted to retire in peace, so he kept himself out there. Every couple of weeks, his daughter from Great Falls would call Jim to do a welfare check on her father, so he would drive over to the guy's place, stop in front of the gate and honk. They'd have a visit, and Jim would assure the daughter her father was fine and that, no, he didn't want to move back into town. Jim had just arrived home in the wee hours of the morning from the X-Files conference, He carried in the boxes, took his boots, gun belt, and coat off, and was about to hit the shower when his phone rang. It was the hermit himself. He was hysterical and begging for help. Insisted Jim come right over, and hung up. The call was shocking, and Jim's tiredness was replaced with adrenaline. Jim put on his boots, gun belt, coat, jumped in the patrol blazer to race over to the compound. About 45 minutes later, he pulled up to the gate and honked. No dogs. Not a sound from them, no snarling, barking, or growling. He gingerly opened the gate in case he had to run for it, and drove through the gate, stopping to close it behind him, calling out to the house, but no dogs. As he drove up beside the porch, still no dogs to be seen. He bellowed out to the hermit as he got out of his blazer, walked cautiously up and across the huge covered porch, and he finally heard a dog whimpering underneath. Looking up, he was surprised to see a window pane broken out and a shotgun pointing at him out the window. That shook him a little, and he said, "Hey, you called me, remember?" As soon as the man realized who he was, he unbarred the door and pulled Jim in, barring the door again behind him. He was still incoherent, obviously terrified. He made Jim sit at the window with the shotgun while he packed a bag. He finally calmed enough to tell Jim about an hour before Jim got there, his dogs barking fiercely at the front door of the house. Thinking that a bear had got to the fence, the hermit grabbed a double-barrel shotgun off the rack, loaded it with 2 slugs, and opened the front door. There was a bear, all right, standing with its back to him, and the dog snarling and leaping at it. The bear was standing upright, and its head brushed the 10-foot roof of the porch. The man told Jim that he gave it both slugs in the back, right where he thought the kidneys would be. The thing turned around and looked at him. It showed no panic, fear, display of anger, or blood. It just stood there and looking at him. It was a Bigfoot. Mostly what scared the man was the lack of blood. Well, that, and he couldn't process the thing wasn't a bear. It didn't make a noise or react in pain. It stood and looked at him as he stared up at it. Then turned again and floated down the steps, at which point the dogs went under the porch. The hermit swore. It seemed to float several inches off the ground. He insisted Jim take him to Great Falls to his daughter's house and never went back out there. He hired movers to get his stuff, put the place up for sale. For several days, Jim went back with animal control to try and get the dogs for him, but they refused to come out from under the porch, even for food. He did a complete search of the area. No footprints, no blood, no obvious place where something came through the fence. On day 3, they lured the dogs out with raw meat and a noose and eventually caught them all. Jim told my dad that even if he thought the man was a liar, which he did not, the animals were so terrified he had to believe the events as told to him by the hermit. No man would go to the trouble to build his dream home, then suddenly flee from it to never return in less than an hour without something that terrified him. Years later, I moved to Columbia Falls, Montana, on the west side of Glacier Park. My friend and her then husband owned the House of Mystery, a fun tourist place on the east side of town. There's a 3-acre property with a natural vortex that sits on the river that comes out of Glacier Park. One evening I got a call that my friend was home alone after the place was closed for the day. She was really upset because every time she got settled down at the table in the dining room to do paperwork, the motion sensor lights would come on and she couldn't see anyone where she went out to check. It had happened a few times and she had nobody to call to come over, as her husband had gone on a 5-day rafting trip to Colorado. Naturally, I said I'd be right over. My daughter was gone for the weekend, so being the good friend that I am, I brought a couple bottles of wine. Sure enough, we would sit down to the table and the motion sensor lights came on within a minute or two. We looked at our glasses of wine and flashlights out to see who it was in our shorts and flip-flops. Being a tourist place on the hitchhiking route to Glacier Park, I figured it was just hitchhikers camping without permission down by the river. We were getting pretty snockered, drinking wine, laughing and talking until we looked around for a bit, didn't find anything. We'd go back in and settle down, and then it would happen again and yet again. A couple of times I heard something that sounded like a conversation between 2 samurais. Deep guttural, but oddly, sing-songy voices with a horrid smell I can only describe as a wet dog, rotten egg, and my gym bag. unpleasant enough to make me realize if those hitchhikers meant to murder us, and they hadn't yet, they weren't planning to. We went in for the night. Several times he/she/it tried to lure us out again, but we went to a different room and talked until we fell into a blissful wine-induced sleep. That fall, I took a temporary job working for the park. I worked with a handsome native guy that grew up across the road from the vortex. He used to sneak out from his grandmother's house to fish over at the river. He wasn't allowed over there because the natives called the place Bad Rock, and his grandparents had seen Bigfoot over there several times. One afternoon, when Grandma thought he was napping, he crawled out the window, grabbed his pole, and made his escape. As he cut through the woods behind what later became the House of Mystery, he saw a bear at the riverbank. He stopped rapidly and made a noise. Only, oops, it wasn't a bear. It was a Bigfoot, a big one. He said as it stood up to at least 7 feet and turned to start at him. He ran home and never went back. Wheels turned in my head, realizing that the bad smell and guttural language was Bigfoot's. I asked my friend's husband about it, and he said he knew they were there and had been trying to get trail camera pics and make a connection with them. I can honestly say that at least 2 Bigfoot saw me. I'm quite sure that they are probably still laughing about it, as I have heard I'm quite funny when I drink. Lastly, in 2010, I was working in Alaska. I was told Bigfoot stories by the natives that lived near me in Juneau. One fellow in particular wanted me to insisted that I shouldn't go out hiking alone. He said there are 2 kinds of Bigfoot in the area. One kind is red/brown ones. Yeah, they mind their own business, and you seldom know they are there unless you step too near their young, at which point the father will step out to distract you while the mother and young ones escape like some wild birds do. He said the other kind are the white ones, and they are cannibals. They eat red/brown ones and people. If you see one, it's already too late for you. He said they like to watch and listen to women and children talking and laughing, and have carried them off in the past. They take a huge dislike to men and seem to treat them as a threat to their territory. Enough said to me. I taste like chicken, I'm sure they know it. That is, Ed, the sum total of my experience. That's a little bit of a typo. That is the sum total of my experiences, and I do feel better telling you. I hope that makes some folks feel better. It isn't your weakness that makes you feel weird and terrified. They have a supernatural ability to project hate and intimidation, and they hate men. Thanks, Jeannie. Alright, and there you go. Share, Jeannie. It's funny how they mentioned if you see a white one, it's already too late. How do you learn that? Right? If every person that saw a white one of those ferocious murdering ones there, then we wouldn't know that, would we? But anyway, appreciate the shares. Man, that poor guy. I wonder if that man, if anybody bought that property, if anybody has that new property, and if they are in contact with anybody from here, or maybe they're watching the channel. Maybe they got something else going on that property, maybe. And usually when people shoot these beings, for the most part, the pattern seems to be them screaming and just taking off, but screaming. More than a handful of times have been blood noted from people who have shot them. Few people have claimed to have shot them dead. And many people claim that you need to shoot them in the head with a high-power rifle, and that's the only way to kill them. Don't know, haven't done it. Don't know anybody that's done it yet, but my horses are running around all over the place. I think something's going on up there, but I gotta go anyway. I'll be back shortly.